Go ahead and get started tonight. Good evening, everyone. I'm Jen Armstrong, the Director of Alumni Engagement at Monmouth College. Just want to welcome you to our event this evening, Energy on a Rooftop, with our very own professors, Chris Fasano and Tom Prince. Thanks so much for joining us. Before we begin, we want to cover some housekeeping items. Tonight's event is recorded and it'll be available on the Monmouth College website next week. For the best viewing experience during the presentation, please ensure that you're in speaker mode, and that can be selected at the upper right corner of your screen. Attendees can ask questions using the chat feature, and we'll answer those at the end or during the presentation. At the end of the presentation, we will also promote you all to host to turn on your cameras if you'd like to ask questions in person. You're also welcome to turn your cameras off if you'd like to, but thought we'd have a little chat after we got done with the presentation. So also at the end of today's event, you're going to see a short 3-minute survey. It'll appear in your web browser. So please feel free to use this survey for your feedback and suggestions for future events. So now I am thrilled to tell you a little bit about our presenters. Chris Fasano has been teaching physics at Monmouth since 1998, a recipient of the Hatch Teaching Award. He has helped to build and expand the physics major and department over the past two decades. He was one of the faculty leaders in design and planning for the college's Center for Sciences Business, which opened in 2013. And the facility includes a nuclear energy lab, the Tribeca telescope, ultrasound equipment, an atomic force microscope, now an AI machine that we fondly call Ellie because an elephant. And all these elements have just greatly enhanced the research experience for Monmouth students, and I'm sure there's more there. And Chris earned his Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Notre Dame and his master's and doctorate from the University of Chicago. Professor Tom Prince has taught marketing and management courses in the past over the past 10 years at Monmouth. He's also a recipient of the Hatch Teaching Award as well. The creative disciplines which compose marketing and advertising fields have been an active interest of his throughout his career. He was born and raised in Florida with summers at his lake house in northern Wisconsin. He worked in the corporate world for 35 years, landing in Monmouth along the way. He's been teaching at the college for 11 years, and you can always find him at the Center for Science and Business for looking for what we call the Q-tip, so the tall guy with the white hair. And I'm lucky enough to share a driveway with Tom and his wife Marie, and very happy to have hit the neighbor jackpot. So if you want to know how he takes his bourbon, please let me know. I'm happy to share. So that being said, enough of me. The floor is yours. I'm excited to hear the presentation.
Well, hello everyone. I recognize a lot of you, and it's delightful to talk to you. Today is the last day of classes, and so it's nice to talk about some interesting project that we've been working on. So I think what we're going to do is I'm going to talk for maybe about 10 minutes. This is very much a project that crosses between the sciences and business, and my side sort of is the science side, and Tom's side is the business side, and we're talking about how to consider solar energy at Monmouth College. So let me begin with a very humble beginning. One of our students, who's currently a senior in physics, approached me a couple of years ago and said, you know, I would like to learn some more about solar energy. And he's a big solar energy advocate. And I said, well, I think it would be really interesting if we could actually measure the parameters. So can we measure what energy we can produce and under what conditions, really measure and then do an analysis, some kind of economic analysis, with the idea that if it turns out that this makes economic sense and physical sense, that we would make a presentation to the trustees at some point. So we started with a very humble beginning, and I'm going to share my screen to show you how humble. So here we go. Okay, this is the humble beginning. That is a tiny solar panel. It's a 10-watt solar panel that's on top of the roof of the CSB. And that's one of our students, Dylan Chiaro, who's there to provide scale so you can see how big it is. So this is the simplest thing you could think of doing. We took a solar panel, a small solar panel. It's a 10-watt solar panel. We set it up on the rooftop. We wrote a data acquisition system, a very simple data acquisition system to be able to measure the power more or less as quickly as we could and for as long as we could. That was actually back in 2018. And I can show you a live feed. We have a live feed. This is the output of that little panel. And since it was last restarted on February 9th. So the horizontal axis is the time, the vertical axis is actually the power. And each of those spikes is in fact a day. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So we started measuring power output from our own rooftop with the idea of really trying to understand what is possible, what makes sense. So we've been doing that for a while, and now we have 3.5 million data points, which are shown here since January of 2019 through now. And it's actually extremely interesting data, and it's going to tell us lots of things. Let me point out some of the features. So if you look in the middle of our plot here, say here from the end of September through the end of April, you see a very interesting swoop in the data set. That's winter here in Western Illinois. That's the power output going down because of winter. And you can see, in fact, over here, the same thing again, okay? So we can clearly see the seasonal effects in this very unsophisticated panel. If we zoom in, we can look at and see very interesting things. So we can zoom in here to January, let's say, and make that a little bigger. And here we see the daily output, and this was from back in 2019. And we can see some very interesting and puzzling features. So, so this is solar energy by day. And we do this every day by as many days as we can. You'll notice there are some gaps in the data set that really in many ways come from COVID, from not being here. The first thing that we notice when we take data is sometimes the data set is very smooth. Like here on the right, and sometimes it isn't. And that's extremely puzzling. So why is it that 2 successive days we could get such different output? Why is that happening? And there are lots of other puzzling things. So not only do we see, of course, that the total output from this panel varies as a function of season, the width of those peaks varies because the length of the day varies. So we will really be able to determine how much energy our panels can produce. What is this, though? I mean, why is this happening? And in fact, it reveals a very interesting feature of solar panels. That raggedy look, and this is sort of taking data every 30 seconds or so, what we're seeing there are clouds. As the clouds are passing over the panel, even shadowing just part of the panel, we get losses in output. And that's going to come back, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. So we have a lot of data that we've been measuring for a long time, and we're looking forward to this summer getting good summertime data. So this is sort of a first step in understanding what kind of energy output is possible from our rooftop. Now, there are some things that we can do with this. We can look at something like this. So this is a histogram showing how many times we produced a particular power. So the power here is along the horizontal, 0 to 10 watts. And then this is how many times cutting out nighttime. And we can see that there are some interesting peaks here, but this the average is probably around 4 watts, or about 40% of the rated output. So very interesting data set. And if we look at what the energy is of that data set, the energy is really proportional to the area under those curves. So here I've filled in the area under the curves. And that really tells us the number of, if you will, watt hours or kilowatt hours. And we can calculate all of that from our measurements. So we're really getting to a point where we can know, and this is something we emphasize with the students, we measure things because we want to know them. And we know them because we measured them. And there are lots of uncertainties and inherent problems, but measuring is central to our discipline. So interesting features, we see these funky things with clouds or other disturbances going over. Okay, so we fast forward and we get a very generous donation from uh, someone who is close to the college through Tom. Tom, do you want to speak for a moment about Ben?
Sure, I'll be glad to. Dr. Ben Damiani is, I've known literally all his life because he's my wife's youngest brother. And he graduated from Georgia Tech, got his PhD from Georgia Tech, and has been working in the solar field ever since he was doing his graduate work there at Georgia Tech. And I approached Ben last summer. We were talking about solar, and he has a patent on a new device, which I will let Professor Fasano explain in more detail. But he was willing to donate panels to us with this technology. This technology is available nowhere else in the country. We are the only school that have these panels right now. And when I approached Professor Fasano about it and said, Chris, are you interested in doing this? We saw an opportunity because he and I have often talked about how great it is to get students in business and science working together to solve problems. And so Ben was able to very graciously donate panels to us, and that's why we have them. So Chris, I'll leave it to you then.
So these panels are these Silfab panels. They're shown here. They're about 300 watts a piece, and Ben donated 8 of them. So in fact, 4 of the current technology and 4 that are new technology, brand new technology, that have a special connectivity in the panels. Now, why do I care about that? Well, in fact, when we talked to Ben about this problem, he knew exactly what we were seeing. He said, oh, well, what's happening there is in a traditional solar panel, the way they're connected, if there's a shadow even over part of the panel, you actually lose often the entire panel output. And so this kind of raggediness that we're seeing in this output is probably coming not from necessarily the panel being completely covered, but even just partially covering. He talked about, for example, leaves collecting on the bottom of the panel can take out, 50% or better of the panel output. And this is a known problem with traditional solar panels. And, we see it, over and over and over again. So it could be anything, could be clouds, could be dust, dirt, anything that covers even part of the panel. Huge problem, you lose this efficiency. So his innovation is a new connectivity within the panel to ameliorate this problem. And so by having these new panels, as well as the traditional panels that he provided, we're going to be able, in our next phase of our study, to be able to evaluate how the new panels perform. And in fact, compare them to the old panels. And this is, I think, a much more realistic test of really how much energy we can produce. Now, these are full-size panels, and so they need to be mounted on our roof. Mounting on a roof is, okay, so there was a drain backup precisely above my office, which led to the ceiling tile falling in. So I'm really sensitive to the whole idea of putting holes in the roof. So instead, we have a pretty innovative scheme for doing this. Let me find my picture of here. And this is actually a very nice way of mounting panels without making any holes in your flat roof. And again, this is a student with what are called ballast mounts. So each one of these little devices, if you will, we'll zoom in, right? Each one of those has a ballast in it, a 33-pound cinder block. And this set of these together will actually act to hold the panels down like so. So it's a really beautiful kind of innovative way of mounting panels on top of the CSB without poking holes in the roof. It's low profile. It's a little more pricey than a traditional mount, but probably in the long run, the idea of not putting holes in your roof is really, really appealing to us. So each one of these mounts is ballasted. You put concrete blocks in it, and you can mount them in groups of 4. So we'll have 2 groups of 4. So this was this was the roof today. And tomorrow's task is, in fact, actually mounting the panels. Once the panels are mounted and wired, we'll be able to take the same kind of data that we have had with the full-size panels. And then, again, we'll be in a position to really evaluate how this works on our rooftop. One of the things that we've been thinking about as well is this nice white roof that we have on the CSB has this huge albedo. It's really bright up there. And that really may help us produce a lot of electricity because of the reflectivity. So this has been a beautiful project. One of the things that's been challenging is we've had to write a data acquisition system for this. And that's nearly complete. I'll just give you a little peek at, this is what a data acquisition system looks like. The idea is that it's web-based, so we'll be able to give people a web address, and they'll be able to see the live feed and the analysis of the data coming from our rooftop anytime you want, as well as a camera showing what's going on. So writing a data acquisition system has been pretty challenging. This is the data acquisition system as applied to a nuclear physics problem. We have this sort of generic acquisition system that we're using for many experiments, hopefully. And this has represented a lot of work. So there are a lot of moving parts here: getting the panels, wiring the panels, building the circuit, writing the data acquisition system. The students have been involved in all kinds of things. And we're kind of really at this cusp now where we've got all these pieces so that we'll also be able to show it to people while we're doing it, while we're doing the science. So, all right, so I'm going to turn it over to Tom, and he's going to talk about the finance side, which is at least as interesting.
Thank you, Chris. Hi, everybody. I don't have a lot of charts or anything to share screen with because Chris has all the cool stuff to show you, and nobody really wants to look at a bunch of power bills. But let me say this at the start. We've been very lucky, both from the science students and the business students that have volunteered, not for credit, to participate in this. We've had Gavin Gard, Brian Peters, and Dominic DeSello on the business side that are all seniors graduating this year, and Brian will graduate in December. But what they've done is they've devoted their time and energy to saying, what is this? What does this really bring to the table, and how do we analyze it? I think our business students have gained a great appreciation for the data collection and the understanding of the science behind solar. Now the question is, how does solar transfer to be something that might be useful for our use, be it for residential use, for commercial use? How would it apply to our campus? So we started in a couple directions. First mission that we had was to collect power bills from the college and to break it down from our 2 different suppliers. The college has 2 electric suppliers, Constellation and Amarin. And we had to break down where are the meters and what particular buildings do each of them supply? How much power are we actually using? What are our power bills? What is our cost of power? If we're going to analyze data and how much electricity we can create, then we need to see if it's economically viable for us to purchase panels, mount them, maintain them, keep them up, and still produce them at a rate that is lower than what we'd be paying by using the traditional grid or parts of the grid. So there's a lot of data acquisition from our part that dealt with the finance of it. And we just have really touched the tip of the iceberg, quite frankly. What we've been able to find out is some interesting things so far. So I'll share some data with you that I think is interesting because of the world we live in right now. Certainly, we've all been affected by the COVID pandemic, and it has had ripple effects across all of our disciplines. But to give you an example, from August 12th of last year to September 12th of last year, so 2020, August 12th to September 12th, our power usage was down 19% from the previous year. Why? We didn't have students on campus, or that was a down month for us. We didn't have the pre-class starts to it. But to give you another example, April of 2020, when we would traditionally have students on campus, April of 2020 was down in power usage 51% from April of 2019, because we didn't have students on campus due to the pandemic and having to shut down and going to remote. So we've been trying to collect data to say, what is our real power usage and what are we looking at? Last year, in August to September, again, the two dates that I used previously of August 12th to September 12th, we used for approximately half of the college, just taking one of our suppliers, half of the college, we used 823,230.7 kilowatt hours. What does that mean? How many panels would we need to produce that sort of power? Where do we get that? Can we transfer what we're learning and the data we're collecting from these panels that we're testing on the roof to say, is a solar field, for instance, really viable for us? Where does this come into play? What is the cost of it compared to the benefit or the savings we might incur if we go to it? We've also discovered a couple other things I found quite interesting. The time of day, the time of year. When do these panels produce at peak, and what are our peak usage hours? Where do we have to transfer power to? How do we use it? So we're examining our peak usage hours, our peak monthly usage, compared to the peak hours we can collect energy. We found that Constellation Energy, for instance, is supplying energy to our newer buildings on campus, the CSBs, some of the newer dorms, the Huff, et cetera. And then Ameren is doing some of our older buildings on campus, or more, let's say, experienced buildings, such as Wallace or McMichael or the Stockdale Center. So we're trying to break down the different energy suppliers to us and what our costs are. A couple of other, I think, very interesting things we have discovered is what we're currently paying. When we break down the power bills, and students have been working on this, collecting the bills, looking them over, seeing what our fees are. And if you really ever need to get to sleep, really review your power bill carefully. You will put you to sleep quickly. But what's interesting about it is that we found out, for example, that we're paying about 1.502 cents per kilowatt hour for retail service charges. And we're comparing those to industry averages and saying, where do we fall in our retail service charge compared to what the industry average is? Industry average is looking at a 0.5 cents per retail per kilowatt hour service charge. So as we look at that, we're saying, why is that discrepancy there? I'm not saying we're not looking at our bills carefully, and please don't interpret as that. But our students are learning how to interpret a power bill. What are the fees? What is really involved in your overall bill? Currently, our Constellation average power bill is running, and remember, this is only for approximately half of the college, the newer buildings, but our current average power bill is running around $38,780 per month. Or if we break it down on a 13-month total, it would come to $504,152. So we're spending a lot of money on power. Now here's the question. Can we take these panels and run enough data and get the idea that how many panels would it take for us to supply even a portion of the power to the college? Now there's a couple things we need to consider there, and some of them are, what are the government restrictions involved in this? Can we sell power back to the grid? What are the special fees or things we would need to do to install panels and use them? On top of that, are there any subsidies available for us to put these panels? What is the economic viability of installing panels and truly using them here, especially in the Midwest, whereas Chris is showing you, we have these peaks and valleys coming in where we're not always performing anywhere near peak. So as neat of a topic as green energy and solar energy in particular is, and one that obviously I have family members involved and I'm personally very, very interested in. But before we can say, isn't this great, let's do this, we really have to break the economics of it down. And as I said, installation costs, monthly energy usage, maintenance, what is our current building, what is our negotiated building, and what would it cost us to really install solar to make it viable for the college, are all things we're just at the tip of the iceberg on exploring. We've gotten this far. We know the energy that we're using. We know what we're currently paying for it. Now we need to start breaking down, once we start collecting the data, where do we come to a break even? Where do we come? How can we apply solar to our usage, even on a small part of the campus or on new builds or whatever we might do? So that's where we're at right now, exploring these things and breaking this all down. I'm excited about this program because our business students and our science students are communicating about a topic they have in common. And I think that's really a neat thing. That's what our college is really about, is having our students say, if we create something, how do we take it to market? What do we do and what do we really need to know about it? And I think that's really the thrilling aspect about this particular product. And
Yeah, I want to agree because so the science students, they're really having to think about we're doing these measurements and we see we see these days that are cloudy days, we see sunny days, we see lots of details about how these panels work and how we can collect energy with them. But thinking through the economics of it is a really important task. And since most of our students will probably be involved, our science students will probably be involved in some kind of commercial science, this kind of experience is really valuable. So there's interesting science, there's interesting engineering, there are all kinds of tasks. And then when we combine it with talking with the business folks and talking with the business students, it's a really nice project. I think very much, I think Tom would agree, very much in the spirit of the building. I mean, this is sort of what we thought we would be doing. And now we'll have these new panels and it'll be, really nice to, be at grade, so to speak.
It's really interesting when I hear students talk about things like, do you know that our average kilowatt hours per month for 2020 was 525,471.15? And then I see students taking out and saying, how do we calculate that? What is that costing us in buying it from the grid? Right. That's really neat conversations for me because they're getting the practical world, the scientific world, merging so gracefully. I think it's an exciting program.
Yeah, really nice. So we have lots of data. Like I said, we have about 3.5 million points, and it's coming in a point about every 30 seconds or so. So, and then when we have the full-size panels up, we'll double that or triple it easily. So managing the data is an interesting problem in and of itself. And then this idea of being able to display the data for people to be able to see, alumni, anybody interested, The idea of public science and making the data sets available is also quite interesting and timely. So we're ready to hear any questions you have about what we're doing or what we'd like to do, or if you have thoughts about what we would like you think would be interesting to know. We're open to all kinds of good ideas. And
Well, we've had a question in the comments, and I will read it, but I also will start promoting everyone to panelists so
sure,
we can have a discussion. I don't know if it helps, Chris, if you stop sharing your
sure,
screen.
I can do that.
But Pam
Yeah.
Gustafson had the question about what wind velocity would move the ballast bases?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So we can put, so the four panels right now are secured by about 300 pounds, and they're low and designed to be close to the surface so the air doesn't get under them. So we're pretty confident we don't have any problem. We can actually go up to, each ballast holder can hold 4 of those blocks. So each of those ballasts could hold 120 pounds. That would put us at 9 times 120, about over 1,000 pounds for just 4 panels. So the ability to put more ballast is easy. What we want to do, though, is be aware of the loading on the roof. We'd like to stay, we'd like to stay below 60 pounds per square foot on the roof. And so there's some balancing act. We don't want to overload the roof. At the same time, we don't want the panels to become airborne. I think the real thing that we need to be careful of, and I was just talking to the students today about this, is I'm not really worried about the wind picking up the panels and the ballast. What we need to make sure doesn't happen is that the panels come off the ballast. That's more of a concern. But the folks who, this is a commercial ballasting system, it's quite well designed and quite well wind tested and so on. So I'm pretty confident that we can do this well. Yeah, we don't really want to have the panel landed in the parking lot. That's nobody likes that. Nobody likes that. Not a good time. So.
Okay. I think I saw someone with their hand up.
Excuse me, Chris, could you explain for just a moment? These panels will be collecting and creating energy.
Yeah.
How are you going to disperse the energy?
Yeah, that's a good question.
The grid.
So
they might be interested in that.
Yeah, so each of these panels produces about 300 watts in full sun. So the set of 4 is about 1,200 watts. And we want to analyze basically each panel by itself. So we actually take the energy and we dump it through a high power resistor, a resistor that can turn that energy just into heat. And the first thing that students always ask is, well, why don't we do something with the energy? Well, for our purposes right now, we want a nice, stable, flat load that we can use for reproducible measurement. So these resistors, these big resistors that are high power resistors, are more than capable of doing that. So each panel gets paired with a 500 watt resistor. So the resistor is about 50% larger than it needs to be, so that we don't have any problems. And we learned that when we built the little panel, we didn't think carefully about that. And we actually put resistors on that were a little too small, and they didn't last long. Let's just put it that way. They weren't happy. Yeah. It's like, oh, let's do that better. Yeah. I thought I saw Greg had a question.
Yes, Greg said if it were found, sorry, it's moved on me. If it were found that an array of panels would be a practical and economical solution, how would you deal with the problem storing energy?
That's an excellent question. And if you look at the data sets that we have already, you see that there are, especially in the wintertime, it can be pretty gray here. And we can have multiple days in a row where we don't generate much electricity. So the storage is actually a big deal. There are a few ways that you could think of doing it. The first is probably the way that's easiest, and that is effectively what you do is you are simply selling power back to the grid. And you make your money when you sell the power, and then you essentially are using the grid as the storage device in a way. And that's probably the easiest thing to do. It's not local storage. It doesn't take you off the grid, but it's effectively storage. Now, there are other ways. In principle, you could buy batteries. That's probably a solution that's for relatively small buildings or relatively small uses, because those batteries are expensive. There are other ways that are more exotic that people have in mind, things like hydrogen storage and so on. I think that this question of how to store the energy is really right now in alternative energy the question to answer. I tell the students that if you can figure out a way of storing energy efficiently at high density, you will change the world and you will be more wealthy than Bill Gates. And please remember Monmouth College when you do that. So it's a really good question. So the short answer is the grid. The long answer is we don't really know. Yeah.
Okay. I think Scott Shaw says, I love that question. Next mission would be to investigate large energy storage devices,
Yeah.
chemical or physical energy.
Yeah. Actually, I have a student who's interested in that. We're just getting started on ways of managing and storing hydrogen. So people have been talking about a kind of a hydrogen economy, but doing that in a way that does not involve gas. And there are some interesting solid state physicists working on this, some colleagues of mine at Missouri, who are using, these techniques where the gas adheres to graphite or carbon. And there are also sort of fuel cell technologies. So there's some pretty exotic ideas for this. How long will our study continue? Actually, the longer the better. One of the things you worry about when you do these studies is whether or not the year or 2 years of data that you have is exemplary of all data sets, or are you just lucky that year or unlucky? So more data in this case is always better. So, we'd like to run this basically, forever. I mean, until we really have panels. And then at that point, when we have panels, if it turns out to be economically viable, we'll be studying the same thing, via a different mechanism. We'll be using the power company, really. So this is a long-term study. You really need the data.
Chris, I wanted to ask you about that in particular.
Yeah.
I mean, data, the solar industry has been under scrutiny for a decade or 2 decades.
Yeah.
Trying to, economic viability has been studied a lot. So,
yeah.
And Tom maybe too knows about this, right? But how does the data you collected compare to what is either out in the academic literature or commercial studies that have been found over the years?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we have only really started looking at that, but so far the data we have matches well the data that exists. And that's actually very encouraging to us. There are some interesting differences that we need to explore. For example, the fact that that roof we're on is a white roof, and there's this huge albedo up there, might actually be a pretty significant effect. And in terms of increasing the output of the panels. We don't know that yet. So our initial read is that we match the data sets pretty well, but I wouldn't put my hand on a Bible and swear that yet.
Sure.
Yeah.
We've also found it interesting that the company that has provided us with these panels, Ben Damiani's firm, will be able to tap in and watch to see how we're doing here in Western Illinois, what our data looks like, how are we collecting it, and it helps them collect more data on the usefulness of these panels. And one of the ways to describe this panel, that me not being a scientist, the way Ben best described it to me was, if you think about, we used to have Christmas tree lights where if one light bulb went out, the whole string went out. Well, now that was a problem with these panels. The new panels, if part of it is covered, as Chris was saying earlier, the panel still produces. It doesn't kill the whole panel.
Yeah.
And that's a really big revolution in
Yeah.
this particular industry. It's a
Yeah,
big-
it's actually interesting. If you look at the panels themselves, you can actually see on the panel, you can tell the difference between the panels by the manner in which they're connected at the kind of cell level. And, you know, we're really curious to get these panels up and see how that connectivity changes the output. And again, you know, increasing the output by 10 or 20% or 5% for that matter, you know, can change the economics a lot.
Yep.
I saw that Stan Chisholm had a nice comment, and yeah, I mean, I think the regulatory environment and the general political environment is a big effect for this, and how that unfolds in Illinois, I think, is not clear right now. We'll have to see. Greg had a question about the reflectivity. Actually, that the reflectivity is a really interesting question, because the idea is that these panels are gathering all of the photons, all of the light that hits them. So no matter where it comes from. So if the background around the panels is very reflective, there's a large albedo, then those photons that are striking the ground around the panels, some of them will be reflected into the panel and not lost into heating the grass or whatever. So having a reflective environment, a white roof, might be, you know, a measurable effect, okay? And people have talked about this, and it'll be nice to see the effect, if we can measure the effect on our rooftop, and then see how the additional connectivity in these new panels matters. So it's, there's a lot of stuff to do here. I mean, there's this data we have and that we will accumulate is really a treasure trove. There's all kinds of things that we can do with it. So other questions? I would love to be able to solve this storage problem. I mean, everybody would like to solve that problem. That's, boy. Yeah.
We've had students explore a lot of different options too. I see one of the comments is about, from Stan also, about
Yeah.
having panels on their roof and charge and not having a power bill, and
Yeah.
powering their home and charging your electric vehicle.
Yeah.
And it's been really interesting to me, because our students have noticed with the absolute shifting in the automotive industry and really trying to go to EVs, that we're going to see more charging stations. We're going to see these things develop on a commercial level. How would panels play into that? So it certainly is our campus and our building that we're looking at. But students are also exploring, what are other applications where solar may really be a functioning commercial enterprise in the future? And that's really neat to have them start thinking about applying these things in what we would say non-traditional ways right now as technology changes. Disruptive technology is going to change a lot of things. And this is one of them we're really finding fascinating.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things that I think is important to remember is it's not an all or nothing, right? I mean, it isn't the case that, well, if we can't possibly provide all the power for the campus, then we should stop and not do it. I mean, I think that, probably something that would be like what we call, what you might call the internet solution, right? That there are lots of paths and lots of, small opportunities to provide power can still be economically viable. If we can, put panels on the CSB, and provide, 20% of the CSB's power. That's still an important thing if we can do it economically. Even if we can't provide all the power, that's, a 20% savings is not trivial and could be very valuable to us. So I don't think I mean, this is why the coupling of the data and the economic analysis is so powerful and so important, because it doesn't have to be an all or nothing. We have another student who's interested in microturbines, and we're sort of hoping to put a microturbine up on the roof to do some exploring for that possibility. I have some experience with that. I did some wind study work for a wind energy company here, and the wind turbine and solar might be complementary in that they provide energy effectively at different times of the year in Western Illinois. So, this is going to be a multifaceted, complex problem to work on. And it's really the kind of problem that you want your students to be thinking about. So other questions? Yeah, exactly. I agree. It doesn't have to be the whole answer. It can just be pieces of the answer, right? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Reducing the demand. Actually, we've had the CSB is actually was designed with that in mind, right? In terms of how it uses energy and
You want to repeat
certainly electricity.
I'm sorry, Chris, did you want to repeat the question?
Sure.
Okay.
Scott said reduce is listed, reduce, reuse, and recycle. And is there a plan to do reduce? And actually the CSB is kind of in that, I was saying, is really designed with that in mind. It's energy use, certainly lighting use is, to designed to turn things off when people aren't in rooms automatically. It's an excellent project to see if we could do more.
Which is really fun to work on, because we're saying, where does this apply? How do we really use this in the real world? How does this apply to us? What a fascinating and I think really eye-opening experience for our students. And it continues. This is not a one-time deal, as Chris said earlier. This is a continuing project.
Yeah.
And I think our seniors that are graduating are anxious to hand this program off to somebody and say, when I come back, I want to see where we are on this program. And that's really neat.
Brad Horn put up the about hydrogen for energy storage. I mean, I think the idea of a hydrogen, I mean, I think I really agree with this. The hydrogen economy is an interesting way to do this. And there's lots of activity right now. I mean, as you know, Brad, how you do this and how you do it safely. And again, this idea of storing the energy, boy, oh boy, that's the part that people need to figure out. Boy. So, other questions? This is a challenging problem for students. I mean, there's a lot of parts, right? So there's sort of the science, the engineering, the data science, the data acquisition systems, actually the visualization of the data. How are we going to show people the data in a meaningful way? How does it become publicly available? Those are all very pertinent and interesting questions. We have this idea that we'd like to put up a 40-inch screen next to where the stock ticker is in the CSB, and have a feed from the roof that shows, solar energy and whatever else is going on up there. So, does the state of Illinois support solar energy projects by giving? There are financial incentives. I don't think they're as good as California, though. But I think there's rising interest in this. Where that goes, I don't know. It's a really good question. Tom might have some thoughts on that.
Did you get far enough yet to find out what the rate is if you sell power back to the grid, what they buy that back at?
Yeah, actually, Tom, you have that number. I don't know if the students certainly have that number because they talked to me about it, but I don't know it in my head. But yes.
It can be sold at whatever the going rate is. So if it's on the index, whatever the current going rate is what they would buy it back at.
That's good. I just, anecdotally, I just put solar on my house a month ago. It hasn't been turned on yet, but the rate here is about 10 cents on the dollar. So you're doing better than we are in Iowa.
Wow. Jeez. Okay. Other questions? So, hopefully what happens in the next, summertime is a big time to work on research, right? So I have big plans. I'd really like to be at the point over at the end of the summer where I could send you the website and say, here's what's going on, and you can watch and see what the data is as it's coming in. That's kind of our goal, because we'd like people to be able to see and think about it.
There's one of the questions, let me just touch base real quickly. One of the questions that came out was about how do we market this? Is there a marketing opportunity for the college with going solar? And certainly there is. As a marketing person, I respect that. And a couple colleges have done it. There's one in California that's now a totally solar college called Butte College. And they are 100% solar. So they say it's a junior college, quite a large one. And they have marketed it very well. Is there an opportunity? That's one of the reasons that Chris and I have talked a lot about having a monitor near the stock ticker in the CSB where you can come in and see these things, see it actually producing energy, watching it transition night to day, cloudy days to sunny days, all these things. I think what a marvelous marketing opportunity to say we're exploring this to see what does it do practically for us? What is the practicality of this? So yes, there are schools marketing it, and I think it is a very it is a very probable marketing avenue for us to take as we collect real data. We don't want to put stuff out there that isn't backed by science. It's a great lesson for our business students to learn. We have to be able to have the data to prove what we're saying.
Yeah, the students have a fairly ambitious idea for what the web page will look like that shows the energy data we're taking, and then some economic analysis that shows payback time, how much the college is saving or earning, et cetera. So, and that would be a live feed. So, you're seeing continuously how it's working, and that would be pretty fun to see.
Chris and Tom, I think Rob has a question, but we're having trouble hearing you, Rob.
Oh.
Can you
hear me?
Yes, actually, now we can.
Oh, well, nice. I was wondering, I think your timeliness of this whole thing is excellent. 2 weeks ago, I listened to the Tesla quarterly report, and Elon Musk got on there and talked about what they're doing with solar panels, the glass roof.
Yeah.
But what struck me was the fact that battery storage is very, very important. I mean,
Yeah.
Elon Musk said it is essential.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, we put in solar panels 5 years ago, the Tesla Powerwall 2 years ago. It was a game changer,
Yeah.
excuse me, as far as dealing with Duke Energy here.
Yeah.
My suggestion would be just listen to about 36 minutes into the Tesla quarterly report, and Elon Musk describes what could be done to electrify America completely.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I mean, I think
we
the battery technology, I mean, the problem with the battery technology right now is it's not particularly environmentally friendly, and it's dependent upon materials that are coming from places that are not particularly environmentally friendly. Now, it doesn't have to stay that way. And, I think as demand for better battery technology continues to rise, the level of innovation will probably rise along with it. But it could look very different. I mean, I it might be very different than what we were thinking of in terms of batteries now. I mean, I think that this is the Wild West, or it could be.
And I agree. And Tesla had a whole battery day
Yeah,
about a year ago.
that battery wall stuff is beautiful stuff.
Yep.
I mean, that
I-
is cool
I-
stuff.
Be happy to email you the picture of it and how we got it all
Yeah.
hooked. But I mean, he's talking about that this is extremely profound. This is Elon Musk saying this, you
Yeah.
know, that when he
Yeah.
talks, I listen.
Yeah.
And he said, if we did things right, we could have a giant distributed utility throughout the United States, and the utility companies will love to participate with this,
Sure.
because otherwise you can't get it done as fast as you need to get it done.
Yeah.
And he said, because if you rely on the grid, I mean, if you're talking about all electric, say, transportation, you're going to need twice as much power as we have today.
Yep.
3 times as much.
Yep.
You're going to include heating.
Yep.
He said, we can do this. And it was a great quarterly meeting to sit there and talk about it. Besides that, it's going to be on Saturday Night Live this Saturday night.
I saw that. Yeah.
So
You'll have to watch that.
we have 5 years, excuse me, since the Powerwall went in, we have 2 years of complete data with what the panels, we have 16 of them,
Sure.
did, and now with the Powerwall. Now we live in North Carolina, and that's a more favorable state, but
Yep.
nonetheless, he was talking about the whole United States.
Yep.
So we'd be happy to help out any way we can.
Well, I may get your email and see if you can't send me your data, because it would be very interesting to see how, I mean, any kind of regional comparison is valuable. Let's put it that way.
Absolutely.
you know.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
certainly we'll, I'll
Well,
get a hold of you.
how do I get your email to you? You want it right now?
Yeah.
Okay, it's Robert R, the initial R, Wells, WELLS.
Yep.
At earthlink.net, NET.
Okay, I will be writing to you this summer and getting data from you.
We
So,
couldn't be happier with dealing with Duke Progress Energy and what has transpired from 5 years of solar panels and the 2 years with the Powerwall. And this would be electrifying the US of A.
Stan also mentioned that he was talking about using his electric vehicle as part of the power wall or a power generator for the home at times, which is really fascinating. Ben and I have had that discussion, Stan, and talking about how that transition, and it's really cool technology that they're coming out with. And please remember that what we're trying to do is prepare our students for the future. And this technology is cutting edge. This is going to be a big part of their future, a big part of commerce. And we really need to look at this.
Yep.
I absolutely agree that it was just last week was Tesla's quarterly report that he talked about this very thing. You Monmouth College is right on the money.
Yeah.
Very good.
Stan has a question about how do you use your Powerwall on a daily basis?
How do we use the Powerwall on a daily basis? It is all automatic.
Sure.
The Powerwall, the solar panels feed to the Powerwall. The Powerwall feeds to the main distribution panel of our house. We've created 35 megawatt hours in 5 years.
Sure.
It's all transparent to us. If the neighborhood loses electricity, we'll ask each other. I'll ask Jan, did the lights blink? And sure enough, we'll go in and look at the Powerwall, and they have a neon strip that goes up or down that tells you to see the breathing or giving out power or whatever. And that's the only way we know that we're on the Powerwall. So it's all transparent to us.
Sure.
And it's always exciting to get the Duke Progress Energy Bill to see how low we can have gotten. And then
Yeah.
I don't think we go any lower.
Well, I know we've been on for about an hour now, and I don't want to keep people too long. This is so interesting.
Great questions, really fun.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any last questions before we go that didn't get a chance to present them? Okay. Well, I want to thank you all for your time. Just want to give you a heads up on a couple more events that the alumni office is hosting on May 19th at noon. Ed Wimp, who is a graduate from 2012, is doing a presentation on patience and persistence, enjoying the road to success. So that'll be really interesting. Then we have our Golden Scots presentation, which is all virtual from June 2nd through 6th. So we hope you can join us for some of those events. And June 15th, we have a presentation on monarch life and migration from Roxanne Green from the class of 81. So would love to see you there. Thanks for joining us tonight. Please take the survey. And Chris and Tom, thank you so much for your time and presentation.
Really fun.
Great.
Great
Thank you,
questions.
everybody.
All right. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.